The entire image of the Montreal Canadiens is changing, and that starts with Martin Saint-Louis, and with some recent quotes from Kent Hughes, Jeff Gordon, and Arber Basu, we have reason to believe that Montreal is going to turn into a marquee destination for players, and it's going to change the whole future of this franchise. We have to get into all of the recent quotes, plus an amazing note on Adam Engstrom, whose team is dominating the SHL playoffs, and some important notes from an assistant coach of the team who has a lot of high praise for him, so you'll want to stick around for all of that coming up on this episode of Habs Digest. But before we get into the video, just want to remind you guys to give us a like when you like the video. The videos do well, other Habs fans see them, and hey, it helps us out and it makes us feel good. So if you wouldn't mind giving us a like before we get into it, we'd really appreciate it. But let's get into it now, Jesse. And Adam Engstrom is doing a bit better than we thought. Now, we already spoke at length a couple times about just how good his Rogel team is doing in the SHL playoffs. The 9 seed went undefeated on the road to the finals in the SHL. Now, that's not done yet. But Patrick Bexel of, I believe it's Habs Eye on the Prize, he has been unbelievably good in covering a lot of European stuff. I will link both articles that he wrote that I'm referencing in this video down below. I really suggest you go check it out because Patrick does some awesome stuff. The first thing was an interview with Brandon Davidson, who was a former North American player, of course, all across, but he now plays as a pairing with Adam Engstrom. And he said, when I look at Adam, he's a totally different player than I am. Opposites attract. Adam is a skilled skater, skilled with the puck. He's young. He's got legs. He can contribute a lot offensively. And he ends it off by saying he's a tremendous player, and I think he's going to be in the NHL for a long time. And then he also interviewed the assistant coach and had some very similar things to say. He's a good skater. Defensively with the gap, the neutral zone gap, the D zone, there's not a big difference, of course, because Adam Engstrom actually plays on the right side, despite being a left-hand defenseman. And then at the end, he even said he just had the puck on the right side, took 2-3 strides and shot. You can see there's a ton of praise, Jesse, for his offensive ability, but mostly his skating and how fluid he is out there. And to get that kind of praise, to say like, yeah, well, this guy he's a winner. He's a championship player is what the assistant coach said. Just unbelievable.
Yeah, you have to feel it's because of that mobility that really it's looking like he's going to have such a long NHL future and becoming even more valuable to the Montreal Canadiens by playing that right side, even though we got some keepers, right? That obviously is the more coveted position of the two for defensemen. So amazing to see that, much like many of our prospects, he's taken this time before coming to North America to really round out his game, though. We know the offense is there. We know that the skating is there, but just rounding out that sort of defensive part of his game as well. And he's showing he can do that as well. He can help his team kind of win, So again, a gamer, right? And it seems like this guy's been under the radar, but I think the word is really starting to get out now on how good Adam Engstrom is.
Exactly, and it's really hard to watch a lot of his games. There's not a lot of places where you can see it. And, for example, me, I knew he had played time at right D. I didn't realize he was a permanent right D guy. Because that team only has one right-handed defenseman. And they have, out of all 8, there's only one right-handed, so Adam Engstrom's kind of being forced to do that. But yeah, Jesse, he's a championship player, as his assistant coach says. There's a lot of other praise from him, so again, another reason to go check out the article from Patrick Bexel, so really, really worth it. Adam Engstrom, just wanted to give a shout out. I know we talk about him a bit. He's one of those unheralded prospects that I think could really make a difference in the future. But speaking of the future, Jesse, this is the crux of this video here. This is what we wanted to talk about. And Montreal, well, all signs are pointing to the entire culture, the entire aura around being a Montreal Canadien. That all seems to be changing, and it starts with Jeff Gordon, Kent Hughes, but most importantly, Martin Saint-Louis. And Arber Basu wrote a great article about this, and he said in St. Louis, the Canadiens not only have someone they can believe get the most out of their players, but they believe they have someone who can attract other players. And they said when Gordon was in New York, it was the city of New York that served as the attraction, but you need something to attract the players. And hey, Jeff Gordon himself said this in the press conference recently, quote, I think Montreal is going to be a place where players want to play. I think we're hearing that more. I think Marty's a big part of that. Now, Jesse, I know the players make a big difference too, and we'll get into that later, but to have a coach that just embraces the team, will go to war for you guys, but also is a guy who's been there, has worked his way all the way up through the ranks, has this apparently unbelievably high hockey IQ, and is also genuinely kind and nurturing. It just feels like there's no better reason to play for Montreal than Martin Saint-Louis.
Absolutely. And somebody that can really bring out the best in your game as well, right? There's many reasons right now. And I think it's important to listen, why is Montreal starting to become a place where players want to come, right? Because that's obviously been, so the one downfall of this organization for a long time. And you can argue many Canadian franchises as well. Obviously, we got a little bit more of those taxes, but I think for Montreal, we're going to attract those players that care more about winning than the taxes. Sure, there's the cold weather, but you play on the ice. It doesn't matter anyway. So I think we're going to get the right players that really want to compete. They're going to be the ones coming over here, right? I feel like Kent Hughes is a big part of that as well. He had a great relationship with players as a free agent. You feel like those contacts are still there as well, right? But also I feel like a young team that you can win with, not just for 1 year, but kind of year in, year out. I think that's why it might be a smart bet. But also I think a big draw is the players, Josh. You know, the young guys that we're seeing really emerging, the guys that want to win. Again, that whole team, you know, with Slap. But again, players like Lane Hudson and Mike Matheson, I feel, and especially with Lane, are going to be so huge in drawing in players just because of the added dynamic that they bring. With Lane Hudson, often with Mike Matheson on the ice, it's kind of like a fourth forward there. So these points of attack that you can really create, like, that's exciting for a skilled hockey player to be able to play in almost a new style, which you don't see all the time, which is starting to kind of come into the NHL more and more, right? But again, just that positive culture. This is the change we need, because you need the talent to succeed, but you need to bring the free agents in to really make that happen. And again, we're not just trying to get in the playoffs. We're trying to be Stanley Cup contenders. I think that's the big difference. That's where we're aiming, and that's clear in the organization. So I think that's going to bring the right players and attract the right gamers to us.
Yeah, and the players on the ice is one thing. Now, while Montreal doesn't have that, super elite talent yet, Suzuki is definitely a number one center. He's good, but he's not in that upper echelon of the NHL. Montreal might be looking for something like that, but even with the amazing players they have, like Hudson, like Slafkovsky, like Caufield, Suzuki, whatever, the bond that the players have is incredible as well. Cole Caufield saying recently, I think we might be too close at times. Like, it just feels like such a brotherhood, right? Like, there's so much camaraderie going around the organization between the players, coaches, management, everything. But like you said, though, it does come down to free agency, and Montreal, no doubt about it, is going to need some more skill if they want to compete for a Stanley Cup. This current roster is just not going to cut it. It is what it is. It's what the NHL is. But we got to talk a little bit about that, too. And here's a quote from Jeff Gorton. This is also from Arber Basu's article. He said, if there's a free agent out there, a great one that can really help us, we'll be looking. If there's a trade, we've made a number of trades since we got here that have helped that, moved it along, been the right age players. That's a different way of doing it. There are all conversations we're going to have. This is the day after the season ended. Of course, during the press conference, we'll go through that. But it's a team that's shown us a lot, and I think we'll spend the summer to figure out if we can move that forward. So again, these free agents, Jesse, these trades, this all stems from Martin St. Louis. And one final quote I wanted to mention to bring up, talking about St. Louis. This is what Arpin said. This is where St. Louis' value becomes even greater. Players around the league see things that he says, see the things the players say about him, get written about him a lot. Guilty as charged, of course. He said players read it, they notice, and perhaps the beginning of this news conference Wednesday, by announcing St. Louis will be around for 3 more years, Gorton and Hughes were sending a message to free agents out there wondering where they might want to play next season, or more specifically, who they might want to play for. And when, again, we're talking about Coach Marty, we're talking about this. When you're trading for a guy, when you're signing a free agent, you're very right, Jesse, in that when you want someone to play for your team, when you want to be a winner, skill is not often enough. Montreal's clearly looking for these guys, these culture guys. And I don't want to put them down again, but look at what happened to Pierre-Luc Dubois. Just saying, right? There's a reason we stayed away. But I think building up this positivity, that's something that we've talked about a lot. It's something we love to do on this channel, stay positive. But that, I think, is the key factor within the organization, this positivity, this drive to win, but also to stick together and fight with each other. That's not something you get in a lot of NHL teams. And I think a lot of people will be knocking on the door to try and get that opportunity here.
Yeah, because under Marty, you're playing under conditions where you're encouraged to make plays, to make reads, and everything. And where we're at in the rebuild right now, like Marty is not even coming down too hard on people. He wants them to, he'd rather them make a mistake by making a read, and kind of not panning out than by not reacting to the game. And I think that's exciting for a lot of players that they want to play there, and the exciting dynamic players that'll really bring over. But as regards for the summer, again, it's like, we're looking, a lot of players, they're starting to be interested. It's just a match made in heaven, it's basically all good. And when we're really studying the rebuild of the New York Rangers, which I think is an important semi-blueprint for our own, they were about in the same position when they really made their big swing for Artemi Panarin. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, it's like, there's no set kind of timetable on that. I think, Jeff Gordon is so right. It's like, you just know when the right deal comes. And when that comes, that kind of signals it. It's like, you kind of need to go with the game as well there, right? But that being said, that's why this summer could be huge, is you feel like we got the right pieces. We now have a line. We have that identity. Now this is something you can build with these younger players. Now is the time when you can kind of start taking, and whether this is kind of the home run or we just really start taking a lot of those further steps. What is interesting to note is Are we going to be patient or follow something similar to the New York Rangers and really make our move this summer? It's going to be very interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, hey, hopefully a player wants to come to Montreal, and I think like we're seeing it's starting to get to that point. One final note I wanted to say, when you're growing up, you're playing sports, and even maybe when you're more grown up and you don't get to choose your coach, I know, like for me in house league and whatever sports it was, you were like, I kind of want that coach. I don't want that coach. And maybe, that same thing might still apply in the NHL. There might be some players feel like they're getting held back or they're frustrated with a certain coach. Marty lets you play your game, but he's going to be hard on the players a bit. And I'm sure it's going to be, as Elliot Friedman said on 32 Thoughts today, he's going to start coming down a bit harder now that the expectations are finally going to be there this season. We'll see how that goes. But he encourages people to play their game. He encourages people to try their best and to, hey, if you earn it, you're going to get a spot. And I think a lot of players will appreciate that. But what do you guys think? Do you think Coach Marty extending for 2 years, and then I know you guys are all going to agree that that's a good decision, but do you think that that's going to greatly affect the future of Montreal being able to attract marquee players going forward? We certainly do, and we hope that you agree. But that'll do it. Whatever. We're not going to cut anything. And for this episode of Habs Digest, if you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate all your guys' support. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.